Welcome to Custom Dice Cups Part 2, two-part, where we will use two parts to make our dice molds. And this will be easier for us to put our dice on the sprue and then be able to just put on the sleeve once we get them out. If we have to destroy the sleeve, we can just reprint the sleeve. As I'm noticing with the bases that I've printed here, there's a little bit of holes. There was only one layer of plastic after the number was printed, so it's pretty thin and I'm worried that there will be some leakage there, so instead I will just fill it in with glue just to make sure that nothing will come out of it. I fixed the models, and those are available to my patrons at patreon.com/geekhappens. Thank you to all of my patrons who have made this possible. If you would like to become a patron and get access to these files, and also discounts at my store at 3dmtabletop.com on Dungeons & Dragons goodies, please sign up. Now here on my sleeves, it's a little bit loose, but I think it'll still work. I'm going to go ahead and test it by putting some water in it, and it looks like it holds that fairly well. It drips really slowly, so it should be able to hold silicone just fine. Now similarly, we will just put a little drop of glue on our sprue, and then I'll put some of the spray on the die, and then put them together, and this should be a lot easier because you don't have to worry about the sleeve until after you've already got your die put right where you need it. Just hold that in place for a couple seconds while that solidifies, and then we'll be able to put our sleeve on and just angle the number wherever you want it to show up on your mold. So much easier. Let's go ahead and do the rest. Once all of those are ready, mix up the silicone and pour it in, and then put it in the pressure pot to get rid of all the bubbles. I'm going to use Dragon Skin 10 as it seems to work the best. It's also a platinum based silicone, so it will work the best with my 3D printed dice. It will not work with the water washable resins. I have also found that if you use some urethane like the Flex or Tenacity resins, that it won't cure as well. Sometimes not even at all. Which is what happened with my main dice that I made that I ended up having to reprint in just the standard. I used Nova 3D standard resin, and that seems to work the best for me without having any issues of it not curing. After the silicone has been pressurized and cured, it's time to take them out of our containers. And the bottom part should just pop right off. It might take a little bit of effort, you might have to work it a little bit, but it will pop right off. And then after you get the base off, you can reuse the base. If you work at getting the side off, you can reuse the side. Or what I did later was I got lazy with trying to get them all off and I just cut them. But if you want to save the side, you want to go ahead and work the silicone away from the edges of the plastic on both the top and the bottom, and then it doesn't exactly push to slide out, but you can kind of wiggle it back and forth and get it to come free. I did find it was easiest to get it to separate from the sides by sticking a toothpick in there and then just rolling the toothpick until it separated completely from the plastic, and then it was a little bit easier to work it the rest of the way out. At first I tried to kind of slide the toothpick through there, but that doesn't work very well and my toothpick breaks. But if you go ahead and just roll it, it will separate a lot easier. then just push on one side while you're pulling with your fingers away from the edges on the other side until it slides out enough to where you can grab it, and then you can just wiggle it right out of there. It's a lot easier on the normal sized or the bigger sized containers, but with the minis, it takes a little bit more effort. Then we'll go ahead and do the rest. And if you also want to just print more later, or are too lazy to try and save the side to use again later, you can just break it off or use some cutters and cut it. Once you have all of your molds out, just take your craft knife and cut straight down to the edge of the die, and then cut straight down on the opposite side so that it just makes it a little bit easier to open that up. But that way you'll have a lot less flashing to deal with later, and you won't have to use a rubber band to hold it together when you fill it with resin. Once you have it cut pretty well, the Dragon Skin 10 is kind of sticky, so go ahead and work around the outside and make sure that it separates from all of the sides that you can get to, and then it will be easier to just pop it right out. And it looks good, so go ahead and do the same thing to the rest of them. For the normal size dice, I went ahead and printed new masters. It's a lot of work, but well worth it. I used the cutters to try and cut the supports off rather than to pop them out, because sometimes they'll put little divots, and even then sometimes you'll get some. And then I will take several hours to, after I cut with the craft knife and smooth it, to sand these until they're perfection. Super glass-like. You want them to be just like you want, well, all your dice to be. So if you do all your work now, you'll have less sanding and other finishing to do later. And I did fill my little holes with UV resin. So then I take that, sand it for several hours, and then come out with my good masters to make my molds out of. Once my dice are completely beautified, I will then go ahead and repeat the process for the normal size dice molds. You might have to do some sanding to your sleeve to make sure that it fits correctly. Sometimes it'll fit tight, but if you sand too far, it might be a little loose like I had on my first ones, but it still worked. I get all of my dice in the cups and then go through the whole process all over again. have some nice labeled molds. Might as well go ahead and scale one up to make a jumbo. Now that I have all of my dice molds made, I'm going to go ahead and make some dice. And I'm going to make them a clear green, just so that they're easier to see, and also so that I can make them glass-like and make them my new masters. But this way I'll be able to see any defects or scratches or anything I may have not had perfect on my previous dice, and then I can fix that and just use those as my new masters. It makes it a little bit easier that way. And then you don't have to worry about using platinum or tin cured silicone later. You can use whatever you want. With the mini dice, I found that it's easier to remove the sprue by just twisting it off, because it usually takes up that whole top surface. But it seems to come out okay. And then just go around the edges like you do so that it releases, and then you can pop it out. They look good and they have minimal flashing, so there's not a whole lot of finish work to do. So we'll go ahead and take the rest of them out. And now that we've gone through and made all of our molds, we'll go ahead and compare them to the previous molds of just using normal plastic cups, and go over the pros and cons. So for my pros, I have that it'll use less silicone, maybe? Not entirely sure, just because of the shapes. Might use about the same amount, but it could be less. It's more efficient in any means. A labeled mold. They're reusable. They scale. And there's less accessories needed. You don't need toothpicks and putty and rubber bands to either make or hold your molds together. On the con side, they are harder to open and hold open with one hand, and the sprue might be a little harder to twist off. But as long as they work well for you, that's all that matters. If you like this video, make sure to show it by liking, commenting, and subscribing for future videos. Time to go make some more molds.